The morning sun rose slowly over the crystal towers of the royal palace. It was a cold sun, pale blue and distant, nothing like the warm yellow star that remembered from Earth. He had been on this world for 3 months now, and he still had not gotten used to the strange light. Stood in the corner of the great hall, his translation device hanging from his belt. He was a small man by human standards, and next to he looked even smaller. There were tall creatures, standing over 2 meters in height. Their skin was covered in hard scales that changed color with their moods. Right now, most of the scales he could see were a deep purple, the color of pride and confidence. The royal guards stood in 2 long lines on either side of the hall. There were 20 of them, each one wearing armor made from the shells of great sea beasts. They held long spears with blades that could cut through metal. These were the finest warriors of the empire, sworn to protect Queen with their lives. And then there was a human, a translator. He heard the guards talking about him. They did not try to hide their words. Why would they? To them he was nothing, less than nothing. "Look at the soft one," said a guard named Thorn. His scales flashed orange with amusement, standing there like a lost child. "Does he think he belongs here?" Another guard, one called Blade, laughed loudly. "The humans sent us their weakest. No armor, no weapons, just that little box on his belt that speaks for him." "Perhaps they sent him as a joke," Thorn said. "A gift to make the Queen laugh." Heard every word. His translation device was very good at its job, but he did not react. He had learned in his first week that reacting only made things worse. The respected strength, and in their eyes he had none. The doors at the far end of the hall opened, and Queen entered. The guards immediately stood, their scales shifting to a respectful blue, also straightened his back and bowed his head slightly. Queen was different from the other. She was older, her scales a permanent shade of silver that came with age and wisdom. She moved slowly but with purpose, each step measured and careful. On her head, she wore a crown made of frozen starlight, a treasure from the old wars that had united the people. Behind her walked her advisor, a thin named Whisper. He was called this because he always spoke in soft tones, as if every word was a secret. His scales were always gray, hiding his true feelings from everyone. The Queen took her seat on the throne, a massive chair carved from a single piece of black stone. She looked out at her guards and then, for just a moment, her eyes found in his corner. "Human," she said. Her voice was deep and strong despite her age. "Come forward." Walked across the hall. He could feel the eyes of every guard on him. He could hear their quiet sounds of disapproval. When he reached the proper distance from the throne, he stopped and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty," he said. His translation device turned his words into perfect speech. "You have been here for 3 months, the Queen said. "My guards tell me you are useless. They say you cannot fight. They say you are weak and slow and that your presence here is an insult to the throne." Did not look up. "I am sorry if my presence offends your Majesty." "I did not ask for an apology." The Queen's voice was sharp. "I asked for nothing at all. I am telling you what has been said. Now tell me, human, why are you here?" "I am here to translate, your Majesty, to help with communication between your empire and the human territories, to prevent misunderstandings that could lead to conflict." "Words," the Queen said. "You are here for words." "Yes, your Majesty." The Queen was quiet for a moment. Then she made a sound that might have been a laugh. "My guards think words are worthless. They believe only strength matters. They think their spears and their armor make them powerful." She leaned forward slightly. "What do you think, human?" Finally looked up. He met the Queen's ancient eyes without fear. "I think, your Majesty, that words can start wars or end them. Words can build empires or destroy them. A spear can only kill one enemy at a time. The right words can defeat 1,000. The hall was silent. The guards stared at with scales that flickered between colors, unsure how to feel about this soft creature who spoke so boldly to their Queen. Queen sat back in her throne. "Interesting," she said. "You may return to your corner, human." Bowed again and walked back to his place. As he passed Thorn, the guard leaned close. "Pretty words," Thorn whispered. "But when the enemy comes, your words will not stop their blades. You will run like all weak things run, and we will stay and fight because that is what real warriors do." Said nothing. He simply returned to his corner and waited. The days passed slowly in the palace, performed his duties without complaint. He translated documents. He helped with communications between the government and human traders. He sat in on meetings where important matters were discussed, turning complex human ideas into words they could understand. The guards continued to mock him. They would bump into him in the hallways and pretend it was an accident. They would speak about humans in cruel ways while he stood nearby. They would laugh at his small size, his soft skin, his lack of weapons. But notice things. He noticed that Whisper, the Queen's advisor, often disappeared for hours at a time. He noticed that certain guards would gather in small groups and speak in voices too quiet for others to hear. He noticed that messages came to the palace in the middle of the night, carried by messengers who wore no official colors. One evening was walking through a quiet part of the palace when he heard voices coming from behind a closed door. He stopped and listened. "The time is almost here," someone said. It was Whisper, recognized the soft, secret tone. "The Queen is old. The people are tired of peace. They want the old ways back. They want conquest and glory. And you will give them what they want," another voice said. This one was deeper, rougher. "When the Queen is gone, the council will choose you to lead, and then the empire will rise again." "We must be careful," Whisper said. "The human watches everything. He may have noticed something." The human is nothing, a translator, a weak creature from a weak species. He will not interfere, and even if he tried, what could he do? He has no strength, no weapons, no allies here. Stepped away from the door as quietly as he could. His heart was beating fast, but he kept his breathing steady. He had been trained for difficult situations. Not combat training, but something else. Something that did not understand. He had been trained to survive. The next morning, requested a meeting with the guard captain. The captain was a massive named Stone, known for his loyalty to the Queen and his hatred of outsiders. "What do you want, human?" Stone demanded. His scales were dark red, the color of annoyance. "I need to speak with you about a security matter," said. "I have reason to believe there is a plot against the Queen." Stone stared at him for a long moment, then he laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "A plot? And you discovered this? A translator, a creature who cannot even lift a proper weapon." "I heard them talking," said. "Advisor Whisper and at least one other. They spoke of removing the Queen. They spoke of taking power." "Whisper has served the Queen for 40 years, Stone said. His scales shifted to a mocking orange. "And you have been here for 3 months. You cannot even understand our customs. How could you understand our politics?" "I understand treachery," said. "It sounds the same in every language." Stone's scales darkened to an angry purple. "You dare come to me with these accusations. You dare insult a respected advisor based on words you claim to have heard. Leave now, human, and do not waste my time again with your foolish stories." Left, there was nothing else he could do. He had tried to warn them and they had refused to listen. Now he could only wait and watch. And hope that when the danger came, he would be ready. That night lay in his small room and thought about his situation. He was alone on an alien world, surrounded by people who hated him. He had discovered a plot against the Queen, but no one would believe him. He had no weapons, no armor, no allies. But he was still alive, and as long as he was alive he could fight, not with spears or blades but with his mind, with his patience, with his will to survive. The guards believed that strength came from muscles and weapons. They believed that courage meant charging into battle without fear. They believed that loyalty meant following orders and shouting oaths. They did not understand that sometimes the greatest strength was the strength to endure, the courage to face impossible odds, the loyalty to stand alone when everyone else had fled. Closed his eyes and let sleep take him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, new opportunities to prove what humans were truly made of. The guards could mock him, they could insult him, they could call him weak and worthless. But when the time came, knew what he would do. He would stand. 3 days passed after his meeting with Guard Captain Stone. Nothing seemed to change on the surface. The palace continued its daily routines. The guards continued their patrols. The Queen continued to hold court and receive visitors from across the empire. But could feel something wrong in the air. It was like the moment before a storm, when the sky grows dark and the wind stops blowing. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt right. He watched Whisper more carefully now. The advisor moved through the palace like a shadow, always appearing where he was not expected. He would speak quietly with certain guards, the same ones every time. He would receive messages and read them quickly before burning them in the nearest flame. Kept notes in his mind. He did not write anything down because written evidence could be found and destroyed. Instead, he memorized every detail. The names of the guards who spoke with Whisper, the times when secret messengers arrived, the routes that Whisper took through the palace when he thought no one was watching. He also noticed that some guards had started to treat him differently. Not better, but differently. They no longer mocked him openly. Instead, they watched him with careful eyes as if measuring him for something. This worried more than the insults ever had. One morning, the Queen called for a great feast. It was to celebrate the anniversary of the unification, the day long ago when the warring tribes had come together under a single crown. Every noble family in the empire would send representatives. Every important official would attend. "This feast," Whisper said during the planning meeting, "will show the strength of our empire. It will remind everyone of our glorious history and our bright future." Sat in his corner, translating documents that had nothing to do with the feast, but he listened to every word. "The security will be the finest," Guard Captain Stone announced. His scales were bright blue with pride. "My guards will protect the Queen and her guests. No enemy will come within 100 steps of the throne." "Of course," Whisper said. His voice was soft, agreeable. "I never doubted your abilities, Captain. The Queen is fortunate to have such loyal protectors." Noticed how Whisper's eyes moved when he said the word loyal. They flickered to certain guards just for a moment. It was quick, barely noticeable, but had been watching for exactly this kind of signal. After the meeting, tried once more to find someone who would listen. He approached a young guard named Dawn, one who had never been cruel to him. "May I speak with you?" asked. Dawn looked around nervously. Her scales shifted through several colors before settling on a cautious yellow. "What do you want, human?" "I want to warn you," said quietly. "Something bad is going to happen at the feast. I cannot prove it, but I have seen things, heard things. The Queen is in danger." Dawn's scales flickered to white, the color of fear. "You should not say such things. If anyone hears you making accusations without proof, you could be executed." "I know the risk, but I also know what I have seen. Whisper is planning something. He has allies among the guards. I do not know all of them, but I know they exist." Dawn stepped back from him. "I cannot help you. I am sorry, human. Even if what you say is true, there is nothing I can do. I am just a guard. I follow orders. That is my duty." She walked away quickly and was alone again. The day of the feast arrived with great ceremony. The palace was decorated with banners of purple and gold, the royal colors. Servants rushed through the hallways carrying plates of food and bottles of the finest drinks. Musicians played traditional songs on instruments that made sounds unlike anything on Earth. Was assigned to translate for the human traders who had been invited to the feast. There were 6 of them, merchants who dealt in rare goods between the Empire and human space. They were nervous but excited, honored to be included in such an important event. "Stay close to me," told them quietly as they entered the great hall. "And if I tell you to leave, do not ask questions, just go." The lead merchant, a woman named, looked at him with concern. "Is there trouble?" "I hope not," said, "but be ready." The great hall was filled with hundreds of guests. Nobles from every province stood in groups, their scales displaying the colors of their houses. Officials moved through the crowd, making deals and promises. Servants offered food and drink on silver trays. The queen sat on her throne at the far end of the hall. She looked tired, older than she had seemed 3 months ago. The weight of her crown seemed heavier on her head. Guard Captain Stone stood near the throne with his best warriors. They held their weapons with pride, their scales bright with confidence. They believed they were ready for any threat. They were wrong. Moved through the crowd, keeping the human traders close. He watched Whisper moving from group to group, speaking in his soft, secret voice. He watched certain guards positioning themselves at specific points around the hall. He watched the doors and windows, counting the exits and the number of enemies he had identified. The feast began with a speech from the queen. She spoke of unity and strength, of the long history of the people and the peace they had built together. Her words were powerful, but her voice wavered sometimes. She was old, and the years had taken their toll. "Our empire stands because we stand together," the queen said. "When our ancestors first put aside their differences, they knew that unity was the only path to survival. That truth has not changed. It will never change." Whisper stood behind the throne, nodding along with every word, but saw the coldness in his eyes. The advisor was not listening to the queen's message. He was waiting for something. The speech ended and the feasting began. Servants brought out massive plates of meat and vegetables. Drinks were poured freely. The noise in the hall grew louder as guests ate and laughed and celebrated. Did not eat, he did not drink. He stood at the edge of the crowd and watched. An hour into the feast, Whisper approached the queen and spoke quietly in her ear. The queen nodded, and Whisper stepped back with a small bow. Then the lights went out. Not all of them. The main lights, the great crystal globes that hung from the ceiling, suddenly went dark. Only small torches around the edges of the hall remained lit, casting long shadows across the floor. The crowd went silent, then someone screamed. "Grab's arm. Get the others, go to the south door now." "What is happening?" asked her voice shaking. "Do not ask, just go. Run and do not stop until you reach the human trading post. Tell them to send a message to Earth. Tell them the queen is in danger." Did not argue. She gathered the other traders and pushed through the confused crowd toward the south door, watched them go, then turned back toward the throne. In the dim light, he could see figures moving. Not all of them were guards loyal to the queen. Some wore dark cloths over their scales, hiding their identities. They carried weapons that did not recognize, strange devices that glowed with a sickly green light. Guard Captain Stone shouted orders to his warriors. "Protect the queen. Form a circle around the throne." The loyal guards responded immediately. They moved into position, their spears raised, their scales dark with battle fury. For a moment, it seemed like they would be able to hold. Then the attackers activated their weapons. The green light pulsed outward in waves. Where it touched the guards' armor, the armor cracked and fell apart. Where it touched their scales, the scales lost their color and became soft, vulnerable. It was some kind of technology that had never seen before, something designed specifically to defeat warriors. The guards fell back in confusion. Their greatest strengths, their armor and their scales, had been taken from them in an instant. Now they were just flesh and bone, facing enemies who had planned for this exact moment. "Retreat," someone shouted. It might have been Stone or it might have been another guard. "Fall back and protect yourselves." And they did. The guards, the sworn protectors of the queen, turned and ran. They pushed through the crowd, knocking guests aside, desperate to escape the green light that had stripped them of their power. Watched in disbelief. These were the warriors who had mocked him for being weak. These were the soldiers who had boasted of their loyalty and their courage. And now, faced with real danger, they fled like frightened animals. Not all of them ran. Dawn, the young guard who had refused to help him, stood her ground near the throne, but she was alone and the attackers were many. The queen rose from her throne. Her silver scales caught the torchlight, making her look like a ghost from old legends. She did not run. She did not scream. She simply stood and faced the enemies who had come to kill her. "So," she said, her voice calm despite everything, "this is how it ends, with treachery and cowardice." Whisper stepped forward from the shadows. His gray scales were now dark with triumph. "It does not have to end badly, Your Majesty. Surrender the crown, and you will be allowed to live out your days in comfort." "I would rather die." "That can be arranged." Whisper raised his hand, and the attackers moved closer. Dawn tried to fight. She was brave, but she was one against many. An attacker struck her from behind, and she fell to the ground, unconscious or dead. The queen stood alone. And then she was not alone. Walked forward from the crowd. He stepped over fallen decorations and spilled food. He passed nobles who cowered on the floor and officials who pretended to be unconscious. He walked toward the throne, toward the queen, toward the enemies who had taken over the palace. He had no armor, he had no weapons, he had only himself. But sometimes that was enough. "Human," Whisper said, surprised. "What are you doing? This does not concern you. Leave now and you will not be harmed." Stopped between the queen and the attackers. He turned to face Whisper and the dark figures behind him. "No," he said, his voice was steady, calm. "I do not think I will leave." Whisper's scales flickered with confusion. "You are one human, you have no weapon, you cannot fight us." "Perhaps not," said, "but I can stand here, and you will have to go through me to reach the queen." The hall was silent. Everyone watched the small human who had placed himself between certain death and the ruler he barely knew. Whisper laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Very well, human. If you wish to die for a queen who does not care about you, so be it. Kill him." The attackers moved forward and prepared to make his stand. The first attacker came at with a curved blade. It was a clumsy attack, too fast and too wild. The attacker expected to freeze with fear or try to run. He did neither. Stepped to the side at the last moment. The blade passed through empty air. The attacker stumbled forward off balance and grabbed his arm. Using the attacker's own momentum, twisted and pulled. The attacker flew through the air and crashed into two of his companions. The hall went silent again. No one had expected that. "The human knows how to fight," Whisper said. His voice was still calm, but there was something new in his eyes. Caution, perhaps, or the beginning of fear. "But knowing how to fight is not the same as winning. There are 20 of us and one of you." Did not respond. He was counting the enemies, counting the seconds, counting his chances of survival. They were not good chances, but they were not zero either. "I gave you a choice," Whisper continued. "You could have walked away. Now you will die here alone for nothing." "Not for nothing," said, "for her." He nodded toward the queen, who still stood by her throne, watching everything with ancient eyes. "The queen," Whisper laughed again. "She is old and weak. Her time has passed. The empire needs new leadership, strong leadership, leadership that will return us to our days of glory." "You mean leadership that will start wars, that will send young to die for your ambition?" Whisper's scales darkened with anger. "You understand nothing about our people, human. You are an outsider, a stranger. What happens to the empire is not your concern." "When I was assigned to this palace," said, "I was told to observe and translate, nothing more. I was told that there were a proud people who valued strength above all else. I was told that they would never accept a human as an equal. He paused and looked around the hall, at the nobles hiding on the floor, at the officials pretending to be unconscious, at the empty spaces where the guards had stood before they ran. But I learned something different, continued. I learned that strength comes in many forms, and I learned that they are not so different from humans after all. You have good people and bad people. You have heroes and cowards. You have those who keep their promises and those who break them. Enough talk, Whisper made a sharp gesture with his hand. Kill him, kill them both. The attackers moved forward. This time they were more careful. They spread out in a half circle, cutting off any escape. They held their weapons ready, watching movements with predator eyes. Reached down and picked up a piece of broken crystal from one of the shattered light globes. It was sharp and roughly the length of his forearm. Not a proper weapon, but better than nothing. Come then, he said quietly. Let us see what I am made of. The first two attackers came at him together. They were coordinated, striking high and low at the same time. Could not block both attacks. He chose to dodge the high strike and take the low one on his left arm. Pain exploded through him as the blade cut his flesh. But he did not stop. He spun with the impact, using the momentum to bring his crystal shard around in a wide arc. It caught one attacker across the face, sending him stumbling back with a scream. The other attacker tried to follow up, but was already moving. He ducked under a wild swing and drove his elbow into the attacker's stomach. As the attacker doubled over, grabbed his weapon and twisted it free. Now he had a real blade. The remaining attackers hesitated. They had expected an easy kill. Instead, two of their companions were down, and the human stood ready with blood running down his arm and fire in his eyes. He is just one human, Whisper shouted. Overwhelm him. They came at him from all sides, could not fight them all. He knew this, but he could make them pay for every inch they took. He could hold them here at this spot for as long as his body would let him. He blocked a strike from the left and kicked the attacker's knee. He spun to parry a thrust from the right and countered with a cut across his opponent's arm. He ducked under a swing and came up with his blade seeking flesh. The world became a blur of motion and pain, lost count of how many times he was hit. His body collected cuts and bruises like badges of honor. His breath came in ragged gasps, and his muscles screamed for rest. But he did not fall. He did not run. He stood his ground between the queen and her enemies, and he fought. Behind him, the queen spoke. Her voice was soft, meant only for him. Human, why do you do this? Blocked another strike and pushed his attacker back. Because someone has to, he said through gritted teeth. Because your guards abandoned you. Because if I do not stand here, no one will. You owe me nothing. Your people owe my people nothing. We have treated you with contempt since you arrived. That does not matter. Ducked under a swing and drove his shoulder into an attacker's chest. What matters is what is right, and abandoning you to these traitors would be wrong. The queen was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, stronger. In all my years, I have never seen such courage, not from my guards, not from my nobles, not from anyone. And now I see it from a human, from a creature my people called weak and worthless. Your Majesty said, with respect, this is not the best time for a speech. Despite everything, the queen made a sound that might have been a laugh. You are right, of course. Forgive an old woman her thoughts. The attackers had fallen back to regroup. 7 of them were down, some unconscious and some simply unwilling to continue fighting. But there were still more than a dozen standing and was covered in blood. Most of it was his own. Whisper pushed through his followers. His scales were now bright red with rage. This is impossible. You are one human, one weak, soft, pathetic human. How are you still standing? Raised his blade. His arm shook with exhaustion, but he kept it steady through force of will alone. You keep calling me weak. You keep calling my species worthless. But here I am, still standing. while your loyal guards ran away the moment they faced real danger. The guards were unprepared. We had weapons designed to defeat their armor and scales. It was a tactical advantage, nothing more. And yet those weapons do not work on me, smiled grimly. I have no armor to break, no scales to weaken. I am just flesh and bone and stubborn determination. Your tactical advantage means nothing here. Whisper's scales flickered through several colors before settling on a cold, dark purple. Enough! I will kill you myself. He drew a blade from beneath his robes. It was longer and finer than the weapons his followers carried, with an edge that gleamed in the torchlight. This was the weapon of a noble, a dueling blade passed down through generations. At last, said, the coward comes out of hiding. Whisper moved faster than any had seen before. The advisor's soft appearance had been a disguise. Beneath those gray scales was a warrior trained in the old ways, the killing arts that had made the feared across the galaxy. Barely managed to block the first strike. The second opened a cut across his chest. The third nearly took his head off. He fell back, desperately defending against a storm of blades. Whisper was faster, stronger, and more skilled. There was no question of winning this fight. There was only the question of how long could survive. You should have accepted my offer, Whisper said as he pressed his attack. You could have walked away. You could have lived. Instead, you chose to die for a queen who will fall regardless. Said nothing. He needed all his breath for fighting. Whisper's blade caught his shoulder, cutting deep into the muscle, cried out and stumbled. His arm went numb and his weapon fell from his grip. There, Whisper said with satisfaction, now it ends. He raised his blade for the killing stroke. And then a spear came flying from the darkness and struck him in the back. Whisper screamed and fell forward. The blade dropped from his hand as he collapsed to his knees, reaching desperately for the spear that had pierced him. From the south door, figures emerged. Guards, but not the guards who had fled. These were different. Their armor was simpler, their weapons more practical, and at their head was a familiar face. Dawn, the young guard who had been struck down at the beginning of the attack. She was bruised and bleeding, but she was alive, and she had brought help. For the Queen, Dawn shouted, for. The newcomers charged into the hall. They crashed into Whisper's followers like a wave hitting rocks. The traitors, already shaken by their losses could not stand against this new assault. The battle was brief and brutal. Within minutes, every attacker was either dead or surrendered. Whisper himself was dragged before the throne, still alive but badly wounded. Sat on the floor, unable to stand any longer. His body had given everything it had. There was nothing left but pain and exhaustion. Dawn approached him and knelt beside him. Her scales were now a bright gold, the color of admiration. You held them, she said. Alone against all of them you held. Not alone at the end, managed to say. You came back. I found loyal guards in the outer palace, the ones who had not been corrupted. We came as fast as we could. She paused and looked at his wounds. You are badly hurt. I noticed. The healers are coming. You will survive. Nodded weakly. He looked toward the throne where the Queen still stood. She was watching him with an expression he could not read. Your Majesty, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, are you safe? The Queen walked forward slowly. She stopped in front of him and to the shock of everyone in the hall, she knelt down to meet his eyes. Because of you, human, she said, because of you. Then the darkness took him and knew nothing more. Woke to the sound of soft voices and the smell of strange medicines. He was lying on something soft, softer than anything he had felt since arriving on. His body was wrapped in bandages, and there was a dull ache everywhere. He opened his eyes slowly. The light was dim and gentle, nothing like the harsh crystal globes of the palace. He was in a room he did not recognize, with walls made of smooth white stone and windows that looked out over a garden. He is awake, The voice belonged to Dawn. She was sitting in a chair beside his bed, her scales a calm blue. "Someone tell the Queen." Tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. Dawn noticed and brought a cup of water to his lips. He drank gratefully. "How long?" he asked when he could finally talk. 3 days. The healers were not sure you would survive. You lost a lot of blood. Your wounds were severe. But humans, it seems, are harder to kill than we thought. Almost laughed, but it hurt too much. "Where am I?" "The Royal Healing Chambers. The Queen ordered you brought here personally. It is an honor usually reserved for members of the royal family." "I am not royalty." "No," Dawn agreed. "You are something else entirely, something we do not have a word for." The door opened, and Queen entered. She was alone, without guards or advisors. She moved slowly, as befitting her age, but there was a new energy in her steps that had not been there before. "Leave us," she said to Dawn. Dawn bowed and left the room, closing the door behind her. The Queen walked to the window and looked out at the garden. For a long moment she did not speak, waited. He was too tired to do anything else. "I have ruled the Empire for 60 years, the Queen finally said. "In that time I have seen wars and peace. I have seen heroes and villains. I have seen loyalty and betrayal. I thought I understood the nature of beings. I thought I knew what courage looked like." She turned to face him. "I was wrong." Tried to sit up, but the Queen raised a hand. "Do not strain yourself. The healers say you need rest." "Your Majesty." "Let me speak." Her voice was gentle but firm. "For 3 months you lived in my palace. My guards mocked you. My people dismissed you. Even I am ashamed to admit, saw you as little more than a useful tool, a translator, a bridge between our peoples, nothing more." She walked to his bedside and sat in the chair Dawn had left. Up close, could see the lines on her face, the weight of years and responsibilities. "When the attack came," she continued, "my elite guards fled. Warriors who had sworn oaths to protect me with their lives. Warriors who had trained for years, who had armor and weapons and numbers on their side. They ran like frightened hatchlings the moment they faced real danger. The weapon whispers people used, said. It took away their advantages, without their armor and their scales. Without their armor and scales, they were still warriors. They still had their training. They still had their weapons and their numbers, but they had lost something more important. They had lost their belief in themselves. The moment they felt vulnerable, they forgot everything they had sworn to uphold. The Queen reached out and touched his bandaged hand. It was a gesture of surprising tenderness. "But you stayed," she said. "You had no armor to lose, you had no scales to weaken, you were vulnerable from the start, and yet you stayed. You fought. You stood alone against 20 enemies and held them until help could arrive." "I did what anyone would do." "No," the Queen's voice was firm. "You did what almost no one would do. I have seen the truth of that now. When death came for me, my own people abandoned me. And a stranger, a human whom we had treated with contempt, was the only one who stayed." Did not know what to say. He had not fought for praise or reward. He had fought because it was the right thing to do, because he could not stand by and watch someone be murdered, even someone who had never shown him kindness. "Whisper is dead," the Queen said. "His wounds were too severe. Before he died, he confessed everything. The conspiracy reached deep into the court. Nearly a third of my guards were involved. Several noble houses supported his plot. They believed that my age had made me weak, that the time had come for new leadership. What will happen to them? The guilty will face justice. The innocent will be watched carefully. Trust, once broken, is not easily repaired." The Queen paused. "Guard Captain Stone is among those who fled. He has been stripped of his rank and exiled from the palace. He begged for mercy, claimed he had not known about the conspiracy, that his flight was momentary panic and not cowardice." "What do you believe?" The Queen smiled sadly. "I believe that when the moment of truth came, he showed who he really was. That is not something that can be forgiven or forgotten. She stood and walked back to the window. The garden outside was beautiful, filled with plants that did not recognize, strange flowers in colors that had no names in human languages. The people are proud, the queen said, perhaps too proud. We have always believed that we were better than other species, stronger, braver, more honorable. The humans we thought were soft and weak, emotional and undisciplined, unworthy of respect. Many humans would say the same about other species. I know, that is the tragedy of it. We look at each other and see only differences. We judge based on scales or skin, on strength or speed. We never stop to ask what truly matters. She turned back to face him. You have changed things, whether you meant to or not. The story of what you did has spread across the empire. The human who stood alone, the translator who fought like a warrior, the stranger who stayed when our own people ran. I am not a hero, said. I am just a man who did what he thought was right. That is exactly what a hero is. Someone who sees what is right and does it, regardless of the cost. They have stories of such beings from our ancient past, warriors who stood against impossible odds, leaders who sacrificed everything for their people. We revered them as legends. The queen sat down again, suddenly looking very old and very tired. But we forgot what made them special. We thought it was their strength, their armor, their scales. We did not understand that true courage has nothing to do with physical power. It comes from somewhere deeper, somewhere that cannot be measured or trained or equipped. It comes from the heart, said quietly. Yes, from the heart, the queen nodded slowly. Humans have a phrase, I am told, something about having heart. We do not have an equivalent in our language. We never understood what it meant. Now perhaps we are beginning to learn. There was a knock at the door. Dawn entered and bowed. Your Majesty, the council is waiting. Of course, the queen stood. There is much work to be done, a conspiracy to unravel, trust to rebuild, relationships to repair. She looked at one last time. When you are healed, I would like to speak with you again. There are changes I wish to make in how my empire deals with humans. I believe your insight would be valuable. I am just a translator, Your Majesty. You are far more than that, far more. She smiled, and for a moment she looked almost young again. Rest now, heal. The future can wait a little longer. She left and Dawn followed, closing the door gently behind them. Lay in his bed and stared at the ceiling. His body hurt. His mind was tired. But somewhere deep inside, he felt something he had not felt in a long time. Hoping. He had come to expecting nothing, expecting to be ignored and dismissed, expecting to serve his term and return home without having made any difference at all. Instead, he had stood alone before a queen. He had fought against impossible odds. He had shown an entire empire that humans were more than what they appeared to be. And in doing so, he had started something, a change, a shift in how two peoples saw each other. It was small, perhaps, just a crack in a wall that had stood for centuries, but cracks could grow, walls could fall. One human had made a difference. One act of courage had changed everything. Closed his eyes and let sleep take him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to prove that the measure of a being was not in their strength or their armor or their scales. It was in their heart. And humans, as they were beginning to learn, had plenty of heart to spare. 6 months had passed since the night of the feast. The empire had changed in ways both large and small. Some of these changes were visible, like the new guards who patrolled the palace or the human flags that now flew alongside banners at official ceremonies. Other changes were harder to see, but no less important. Stood in the great hall in the same spot where he had once stood as a forgotten translator, but everything was different now. He wore clothes made from materials, a gift from the queen herself. On his chest was a medal, a silver star that marked him as a hero of the empire. The hall was filled with people. Nobles and human diplomats stood side by side, talking and laughing together. It was a sight that would have been impossible 6 months ago. Now, it was becoming normal. "You look uncomfortable," Dawn said. She stood beside him, her scales a friendly green. She had been promoted after the attack, given command of a new unit of guards. A unit that included, for the first time in history, human warriors. "I do not like crowds," admitted, "or attention." "Then you chose the wrong moment to be a hero." Smiled slightly. "I did not choose anything, I simply did what needed to be done." "And that is why they love you," Dawn gestured at the crowd. "You did not seek glory, you did not ask for reward, you just stood there bleeding and broken and refused to move. The respect that, more than you know." The doors at the far end of the hall opened, and Queen entered. The crowd fell silent and turned to face her. She looked stronger than she had before the attack, as if the crisis had given her new purpose. Behind her walked a group of humans. Recognized, the merchant he had saved on the night of the feast. She had returned to as part of the new diplomatic mission, her trading business now a bridge between two peoples. The Queen took her place on the throne and looked out at the assembled crowd. Her scales shimmered silver in the crystal light. "Friends," she said, "we gather today to celebrate a new beginning. For too long our peoples have kept each other at arm's length. We have traded goods but not trust. We have exchanged words but not understanding. That time is over." She gestured, and a servant brought forward a document on a golden tray. "This is the Treaty of Unity," the Queen continued. "It establishes a new relationship between the Empire and humanity. Not just trade, but true partnership. Our peoples will learn from each other. We will work together. We will stand together against any threat." The crowd murmured with excitement. This treaty had been months in the making, the result of countless meetings and negotiations. Had been involved in many of them, his role as translator now expanded to include advisor and bridge builder. "But before I sign this treaty," the Queen said, "I wish to speak of how it came to be. I wish to speak of courage." She looked directly at. The entire hall turned to follow her gaze. 6 months ago, an enemy struck at the heart of this empire. They planned their attack carefully. They exploited our weaknesses. They turned our own people against us. And when the moment came, our defenses crumbled. Our guards fled. Our allies hid. In that dark hour, only one person stood between me and death. The Queen rose from her throne and walked toward. The crowd parted before her like water around a stone. "A human," she said, "a translator, a being whom my people had dismissed as weak and worthless. He had no armor. He had no weapons. He had no reason to risk his life for a queen who had never shown him kindness." She stopped in front of and looked into his eyes. But he stood anyway. He fought against impossible odds. He bled and suffered and refused to fall. And because of him, I am alive today. Because of him, this empire still has a queen. Wanted to look away, to escape the attention of hundreds of eyes. But he held the Queen's gaze and said nothing. "They have always believed that strength is the highest virtue," the Queen continued. "We trained our warriors to be strong. We built our society around strength. But we forgot something important. Strength without heart is worthless. Armor without courage is empty. The mightiest warrior means nothing if they run when the battle grows difficult." She turned to address the crowd. "Taught us this lesson. He showed us what true courage looks like. It is not found in scales or armor or weapons. It is found in the heart, in the choice to stand when others run, in the will to keep fighting when all seems lost." The Queen took the treaty from the servant and unrolled it. "I signed this treaty not just as a political agreement but as a recognition of truth. Humans are not weak. They are not worthless. They are allies, partners, friends, and we are honored to stand beside them." She signed the treaty with a flourish. The crowd erupted in applause, and human alike stepped forward to add the human signature. As she did, she caught its eye and smiled. "You started something," she said quietly, something that will change the galaxy. I just stood in front of a door, replied. That is all any of us can do, said. Stand in front of the doors that matter. The rest takes care of itself. The ceremony continued with speeches and celebrations. Food was served, drinks were poured, and for the first time in centuries, humans danced together in the great hall of the palace. Found himself standing at the edge of the crowd again, watching it all with quiet satisfaction. Dawn joined him, holding 2 cups of wine. You should be celebrating, she said, offering him a cup. I am in my own way. He took the wine and sipped it slowly. This is strange for me. I came here expecting nothing. I expected to serve my term and go home forgotten. Instead you became a legend. Dawn's scales shifted to a warm orange. The humans have their own stories about you now. The man who stood alone, the translator who fought like a god, they tell children about you. I am not a god. I am not even a particularly good fighter. I just refuse to give up. That is what makes the story worth telling. Dawn clinked her cup against his. Anyone can win when the odds are in their favor, but to fight when you cannot win, to stand when you cannot possibly survive, that is something special. That is something worth remembering. They drank in comfortable silence, watching the celebration unfold before them. After a while, the queen approached. The crowd parted for her, but she waved them back to their conversations. She said, "Walk with me." They left the great hall and walked through the quiet corridors of the palace. The sounds of celebration faded behind them until there was only the soft echo of their footsteps. I have been thinking about the future, the queen said. My future, the Empire's future, your future. My future is to continue serving as translator and advisor, whatever you need. The queen smiled. I had something else in mind. The treaty we signed today is just the beginning. There will be challenges ahead, resistance from those who still believe in the old ways, misunderstandings between our peoples, problems that require a special kind of person to solve. What kind of person? Someone who understands both humans and someone who has proven their courage beyond any doubt. Someone who can bridge the gap between our peoples, not just with words but with actions. She stopped walking and turned to face him. I want you to be my ambassador to humanity, not just a translator but a true representative of the Empire. You would speak with our voice. You would help shape the future of our relationship. Was silent for a moment. It was an enormous responsibility, an honor beyond anything he had imagined. Why me? He finally asked. There are others more qualified, diplomats, politicians, people who have trained for this kind of work. Perhaps, but none of them have done what you have done. None of them have proven themselves the way you have. When the moment came, you showed who you truly were. That is worth more than any training or qualification. Thought about his life before, his small apartment on Earth, his ordinary job, his quiet existence. He had never wanted to be special. He had never sought adventure or glory. But sometimes life had other plans. I accept, he said. The queen nodded with satisfaction. Good. Then let us return to the celebration. There is much work to be done in the days ahead, but tonight we celebrate. Tonight we remember what one person can achieve when they refuse to give up. They walked back toward the great hall. The sounds of music and laughter grew louder as they approached. One more thing, the queen said before they entered. The guards who fled that night, the ones who abandoned their posts, some of them have asked for forgiveness. They claim they have learned from their shame. What will you do with them? The queen was quiet for a moment. I will give them another chance, not because they deserve it, but because I believe in second chances. You taught me that. When you could have hated us for how we treated you, you chose to stand with us instead. That is a lesson I will not forget. She pushed open the doors, and they stepped into the light and noise of the celebration. Stood among the crowd, and human alike, and felt something he had never expected to feel on this alien world. He felt like he belonged. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders. Countless species lived among the stars, each one unique, each one with their own strengths and weaknesses. For centuries, they had kept to themselves, trading and fighting and growing but never truly connecting. Now something new was beginning. A bridge between peoples. A partnership built not on strength or fear, but on understanding and respect. And it had all started with one human who refused to run. One human who stood alone before a queen. One human who proved that the measure of a being was not found in their armor or their weapons or their scales. It was found in their heart. And in that heart, the future of two peoples was born.